Top five, top five, top five.
Ladies and gentlemen, what is going on? Welcome to the countdown. As you can see, we have a special guest, Anish, on the podcast, the co-host of the Cold Hard Truth podcast and a scout for Cal football. It's great to have you on, man.
Man, thank you guys so much for having me, man. It's been a minute, but we're here to talk some football. Let's do it.
In case y'all didn't know, back in 2020, Anish and us actually had a podcast episode together. It went really well, so we really appreciate the knowledge that Anish brings to the game, and we're just really happy to have him back for another episode of Pro Sports Outlook.
Yeah, highly intelligent guy, really knows the game of football, so a great person to have as we break down and rank the top 5 most underrated players in the game, because we got 2 underrated podcast hosts on the show.
But before we get into the episode, make sure you smash that like button and damn sure subscribe, because we're going to be back every single week with some fire episodes.
And before we get into the countdown, go check out Fan Gear Nation for some great jerseys.
Not only do they got jerseys, but they got canvases for the wall, shirts, sweatshirts, and all of this for the low. But don't worry, we still got y'all with a discount code.
That's right. This is PSO's official merchandise partner, so you can use code PSO15 for 15% off your first order. So go type in fangearnation.com while those low prices are still available. Support your favorite squad and save a good amount of money while doing it.
And now, back to the countdown.
So getting into number 5 for the Las Vegas Raiders, we got offensive tackle Kolton Miller, Anish, at left tackle.
Yeah, let's get it started with Kolton. I mean, I think for him, he's a 6'8", 325-pound left tackle for the Raiders. One thing that McDaniels really wanted to implement with the Raiders was the play-action scheme, and I think Kolton was really big for that. He had a little bit of problems with penalties. I think he picked up 5 over the course of the year. A couple that I didn't really agree with that should have been called, but he played 1,000 snaps for him. I thought he was really good in getting the passing game going. And then for Josh Jacobs, I thought the C-gaps were opened a lot for him on outside runs, and I think he was a big reason why Jacobs had that amazing all-pro caliber season. So Kolton definitely should be on this list.
Yeah, Nish, and I'm glad you covered the schematics part, because that's a huge part of playing offensive line. And another thing that you touched is the fact that he's 6'8". And the unfortunate thing for Kolton Miller is the fact that he's played for the Las Vegas Raiders over the last 5 years of his career since he's been drafted. And the Raiders have been one of the worst offensive lines in football during that tenure. However, he was still able to produce the 5th best grade of any offensive tackle in 2021 and the 6th best last year. And even though those are PFF-related stats, PFF is actually a really good source when it comes to grading offensive linemen, and they're one of the only sources that do a truly good job of covering offensive linemen from top to bottom. And once again, that's 5th and 6th ranked tackles overall, not just left tackle or right tackle. So they're really just admiring and astonishing, and just the way that he's played over the last 2 years has just been really great for a team that's really needed him.
Yeah, and Kolton Miller is a guy who came in the league as a middle of the first round pick, a guy who didn't have much success to start out, struggled a lot that rookie year, and a lot of people were quick to call him a bust because, you know, the Raiders were seen as reaching on that first round pick. But Kolton Miller really started to put it together after that. In the last 2 years, like you said, PFF ranking him a top 5 left tackle in the league in back-to-back years, really a stalwart at that position, one of the most important positions in all of football, protecting that blind side now for Jimmy G, and he's really the, you know, most pivotal part of that Raiders offensive line that has struggled, and that's a big part of why he's gone under the radar, because the offensive line unit as a whole hasn't had much success, but it's not because of Kolton Miller. He's been doing his thing. He's got great size, been able to put his hands on guys, and once he does that, it's over. And he's been able to have a lot of success these last 2 years, got a sizable contract, but even that went under the radar. It seemed like hours later, no one was really talking about it after that initial news cycle, but he's clearly proven himself as one of the best offensive tackles in the National Football League.
Yeah, overall, with the left tackle position being one of the prominent ones in the NFL, it's very rare to have somebody that's graded so well over the last 2 years barely get spoken about. So, I mean, we're just trying to highlight Kolton Miller and highlight all the great things that he's done over the past 2 years, and his combination of size, speed. I think he ran like a 4.98 40 when he came out in the combine. Is one of the main reasons why he was able to slide into the first round, and it's just great to see that he's living up to that first round, you know, grade selection.
Yeah, so we tried to balance it out with players at each position. So the only quarterback we have on this list at number 4 is Tua Tagovailoa, Brennan.
Yeah, I have really big mixed feelings about Tua Tagovailoa. I mean, at the end of the day, he had a really good season last year, was really efficient, had some really big-time plays and some big-time throws. But on the contrary, he was near the top in turnover turnover-worthy plays percentage since he minded up missing 3 or 4 games. And he just really threw a lot of ducks, a lot of deep balls that were just floating, and wound up getting picked off, or luckily, it got knocked down. And at the end of the day, it's hard for me to get that Green Bay Packers game out of my head. I believe it was Christmas Eve last year where he threw 3 picks and just looked awful. And this is also when he just came off his concussion, and he wound up going into concussion protocol after that game. So it might have still been some effects from the bigger hits that he's taken earlier in the year, but that's also one of the reasons why Tua is kind of up and down, because one of the best things, or the best thing, is availability. The best ability is availability, and Tua's really struggled with availability due to his injuries, whether it's his hip or his ankles, and that's one of the things that's one of the reasons why he's not as mobile as he was when he was at Alabama. So if Tua can stay upright and healthy, the sky's truly the limit for him, but for some reason he's highly disrespected across the NFL landscape.
Yeah, and I think that's a big reason why he's underrated in today's game, is because people watch him play, they see those ducks, they see those bad passes, they see the injuries that he's compiled over his career. But the reality is, no quarterback's perfect. Every quarterback has bad passes. A lot of players were injured. It seems like every top quarterback in the AFC had some type of injury that they were going through last year. But the thing about Tua is that, he might not be the most talented player. He might not have the best arm. He might not have the most mobility or the best legs to bring to the table. But what he does do is continue to produce time after time after time. And if you look about it, he was, winning games left and right. Started out the year 3-0, then got hurt in that Bengals game. They lost all 3 games that he didn't play the whole game, and then he comes back. They win 5 in a row. They're 8-0 with Tua. They're rolling. Obviously, later in the year, in that Packers game on Christmas, he got another concussion, and so I completely agree with you. The best ability is availability. That, to me, is Tua's Achilles heel, for lack of a better term. But what Tua does bring to the table when he's on the field is an MVP caliber quarterback. And the reason I know that is because just last year he was an MVP candidate, top 3, right there with Mahomes, right there with Jalen Hurts when he was healthy.
Yeah, so I could agree with Brandon's analysis on Tua, especially with the scheme. One thing that I was really excited for with Mike McDaniel was the whole throw it quick, West Coast offense. And that's what Tua's thrived on, right? He gets the ball out super quick, super accurate. And I know people were questioning the whole deep ball thing, and it definitely lingered. Like, we definitely saw some of that as well. And then also with the injury concerns, hip injury at Alabama, it was something that I was a little bit less concerned with people having it coming into the draft. It's obviously kind of stayed with him. But when he is healthy and when he has played, he has executed this Dolphin scheme to perfection. They were 8-3, as Rob was mentioning, looking like, close to the top seed in the entire conference. Then he goes down. The Dolphins really struggled on offense. That Week 18 game against the Jets, it seemed like nobody could score because they had no real quarterback out there for both teams. But the wild card game gave me some hope, right? They were able to score, I believe, like 34 points in a really big shootout with Buffalo. And I think if Tua was there, you're not going to make the same mistakes that Skylar Thompson did. So I think Tua coming back next year, obviously the concussions are going to be concerning. But when you look at his on-field play, he executes the scheme well. I think he really makes Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill pop off. I think Gesicki, not being there, Daniel Smythe is going to be, I think, their tight end number 1, so that's going to be a little bit concerning over the middle. But I think that's no shortcomings to Tua's ability. I think he's going to be able to be just fine with that. So I think he's definitely an underrated guy coming in. Honestly, I don't really know where people rank him. I've seen some people put him in that top 10 area. I've seen some people have him outside the top 20. For me, I think he's kind of right in there in that middle. I think I would put him on the upper side of the top 15, kind of closer to that top 10 range, because when he is healthy, I love his game. But definitely going to be interesting to see, because the Dolphins have some draft capital coming up, and you could easily move off a guy like him if you keep this roster intact, because they've really spent a lot building around him, both on offense and on defense. This is a team that's going to be good both in 2023 and in beyond. So definitely going to be interesting to see where Tua goes from here.
Yeah, 100%. And the thing about Tua is some people might try to knock him for being in a system that was, honed by Shanahan in San Francisco. And you've seen quarterbacks like Jimmy Garoppolo, Bryce, the quarterback from last year that went last pick. And you've seen these guys thrive in a system that's, quick throws, really relies on the run game. And we didn't see that from Miami last year. So there is disparities in their game. Miami doesn't throw the ball to the tight end whatsoever. And San Fran doesn't throw the ball to the tight end a lot, but they make sure to use their all-pro weapon at tight end and George Kittle. So, there are disparities between this offense, but I think Mike McDaniel has done a great job of, working the system around Tua and using it to his strengths. I think that's why we saw him play so well last year, even though it's only year 1 in that system.
Yeah, plus he got those weapons, and that's the thing. Like, when Tua was coming in the league, He might have had the worst offensive coaching staff in football, the worst group of weapons, the worst offensive line. Nobody was in a worse position to succeed than Tua, and we saw him struggle, as we'd probably see almost any quarterback struggle in that type of situation. Now you're adding guys like Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle starting to develop, Mike McDaniel, one of the best young play callers in the league, all helping Tua succeed. And sure, some people are going to take the credit away from Tua because of those type of people around him. But the thing is, look around the league. Every single successful quarterback has high-quality people around him, has high-quality coaching staffs in place. That's why football is a team game. It's not one player that goes out there and wins. It's about what team goes out there and win. And Tua is one of the few people who I would trust to help my team go out and win a game as well as anyone.
Please get him an offensive line, please. Help him out there.
Right. Moving on to number 3, we got the reigning NFC champion Josh Sweat for the Philadelphia Eagles. Brandon, I'm going to ask you this. If you had to name someone on the Philadelphia Eagles, what's the first person that comes to mind?
Shoot, I'm thinking Jalen Hurts, Hassan Reddick, the receivers, almost anybody really besides Josh Sweat.
And on the defense, who would you say?
Probably Hassan Reddick would be the first. Darius Slay, D tackles, Jordan Davis. A
lot of names that you could probably name before we get to Josh Sweat, and that's exactly why he's on this list, because he's so underrated because of the people around him. There's so much high-quality talent on that Philadelphia team, on that Eagles defense that, puts him in a spot that's not getting much national spotlight. Hassan Reddick making those big plays in the NFC Championship, coming back home to PA, having a great year. Brandon Graham, obviously a great player for them, for that franchise, for the last decade plus. Even Derek Barnett being a guy who was picked in the first round, he's getting a lot of attention. Now they're adding Nolan Smith out of Georgia in the first round, so much competition in there. But if you look at it from a snap-by-snap basis, Josh Sweat's as productive as anyone. If you need a third down, you need to make some play in the backfield, cause some havoc, Josh Sweat's up there with anyone. And sure, maybe that's part of it is because he does get to rest. He does get to take some drives off. He is able to stay fresh and, have that full energy throughout the game. But you see him on the field. He's making plays left and right. He's really one of the best edge rushers in the league. And if he was on a different team, he might have as much success as anyone.
Yeah, and the thing about him is he only played 53% of the snaps last year, and that ties into the competition you talked about. And that comes to the competition, competing with Brandon Graham, competing with Hassan Reddick, and now competing with the edge, Nolan Smith from Georgia.
Right.
So, he's getting a lot of snaps that he's having to share with other players, yet he still posted 11 sacks and a pick six, despite only playing 53% of the snaps. The thing about him is he's able to guard the run and the pass, so he's able to play all 4 downs, all 3 downs throughout the whole defensive play. Yep. And he's really kind of replacing what Brandon Graham has done for the Eagles during that time, because Brandon Graham's always been stout against the run, and he's always found a way to get to the quarterback, and that's where Hassan Reddick kind of lacks a little bit. He's a smaller guy, so you don't want a lot of teams running the ball right at him. You want him really in on third down, making all the splash plays that he made throughout the season. And if there's one thing about Josh Sweat, he started over the last 2 years for a reason. It's because of his scheme versatility. He can do a little bit of it all, despite being one of the unheralded players on this team. So, just the way that he's been a stalwart, or the way that he's been a key cog for this team over the past 2 years, is the reason why he did get paid a decent amount of money, but he's still slept on throughout the NFL landscape.
Yeah, I think you guys said it best. I think with Josh Sweat, so he was one of 4 Eagles players with multiple or double-digit sacks. And looking back, especially this past season, I think, as you were mentioning, playing only 53% of the snaps, one thing that Howie and Jonathan Gannon really wanted to emphasize in Philadelphia was having a lot of depth so that when the guys come in, they're fresh, off the edge, right, got great energy. And that's actually what we're trying to do at Cal. We've got, I believe, over 6 guys playing interior D-line, just rotating them in and out. So that's kind of what we're trying to do, and every team should be doing that, right? You want your defensive linemen fresh legs, right? Because offensive linemen, it's really hard to have depth in that kind of area. You build a chemistry with them. But D linemen, it's a little bit easier, right? You kind of, each one has their own separate role. And Josh Sweat does it really well off the edge. He's got great hand technique. He's got great rip moves, something that I love to watch when I watch my D linemen. So definitely an underrated piece. Someone that you don't really talk about a lot when you mention Eagles players, as you guys were alluding to. But he's definitely going to be a big part of this team for years to come.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly why he is very underrated in this league. Just like at number 2, we got Tyson Campbell for the Jacksonville Jaguars, someone who, Anish, you wanted at number 1 originally.
I did. So I'm a big Tyson Campbell fan, and actually on our TikTok when I was uploading about corners last year, I got a lot of hate because I put him below a couple of guys that maybe I shouldn't have. But I had guys like PS2 above him, JC Horn, which a lot of guys can probably agree with to this day. But Tyson Campbell, he was a second round pick in 2021. He's like 6'1", I believe he's 185. He's got great length. He's got great size. He plays a lot taller than he is, which is already crazy saying he's 6'1". And he's been the Jags' #1 corner for pretty much the last 2 years since he's come into the league. And he's been really versatile because I've seen him in nickel situations. He's played inside too. He's a great ball hawk. He's got great hands. And I think the Jags have really found a cornerstone piece. Obviously with Jalen Ramsey and AJ Boye, they kind of had that Saxonville cornerback duo. They've been kind of looking for that. They tried drafting CJ Henderson in 2020. Didn't really work out so well. But Tyson Campbell's been a great rebound for them. And yeah, honestly, I would probably put him at 1, but when we give our #1, you can kind of see why we got him there. But Tyson Campbell, absolute stud.
Right, exactly. A great defensive back for the Jacksonville Jaguars, and kind of like Kolton Miller, didn't have the best rookie year, didn't start out great. A lot of people are quick to make those judgments, make those evaluations based on what they see first, but just give him some time, give some patience, let him develop, and he's clearly showing that he can be one of the better cornerbacks in the NFL. And on that Jacksonville defense, now you have Tyson Campbell, you have Josh Allen, you have Trayvon Walker, 3 cornerstones to that franchise. It's not just on the offensive side of the ball with Trevor Lawrence and Calvin Ridley and Travis Etienne. Now they have these guys on the defensive side of the ball that can grow with them and can really help elevate that team into being a Super Bowl contender that a lot of people see that they can become. And a big part of that is because Tyson Campbell, while the national media might see him as not this great guy, people in that building clearly see him as one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL.
Yeah, and Tyson Campbell, if I'm not mistaken, was one of the youngest players in the 2021 NFL draft. And part of the reason why he's been so unheralded or has been flying under the radar some is because he was like the 6th or 7th cornerback taken in that draft. You have the likes of J.C. Horn, Patrick Surtain, Caleb Farley, who's kind of busted out some. You have Greg Newsome for the Browns. So there was a bunch of corners that wound up going ahead of him, and he was the first pick of the 2nd round. So obviously the Jaguars made him a priority at the end of the day. But at the end of the day, he played the most snaps of any corner in the NFL last year and still was one of the most productive players. We did it from the beginning of the year to the end of the year more than any player has, and still, was dominant at the end of the day as a second-year player. So, I mean, just the things that Tyson Campbell was able to do as a young player, it's made players like Shaquille Griffin expendable, and that's why he got cut, and that's why he's out of there. So the Jaguars, with Doug Peterson in there, they're trying to go younger. They're trying to really focus on, talent progression and all that, and Tyson Campbell's a great example of a player that's transitioned from year 1 to year 2.
Right, developed a lot since those days at the University of Georgia, keeping it going in Jacksonville. And at #1, though, we have the only guy who's more underrated than Tyson Campbell at safety for the Washington Commanders. We got Kamren Curl, Brandon.
The thing about Cam Curl, it's really easy to go under the radar when you play for the Washington Commanders. Yeah, nobody goes to the game. They have a shitty stadium. Nobody likes the owner. So it's easy to go under the radar. And that's part of the reason, he was a 7th-round pick. Yeah, he started from the day 1 that he's walked into that Washington Redskins facility. And you guys heard me say it over and over again. You make players expendable when you're underrated. And that's why you saw Bobby McCain go out the door as a first during his beginning of his career. And then you saw Derek Forrest come in this year and has looked like a really good player alongside of him. And part of the reason is Cam Curl is so versatile. He's one of the best safeties in coverage, and he's one of the best safeties coming up in the box and making tackles. So Cam Curl can do a little bit of it all. And to get a steal in the 7th round that's produced over and over again, especially over the last 2 years, is something that you rarely see in Washington and rarely see in general. So Cam Curl is really the real deal.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail in the coffin when you talked about his versatility. I think one thing I saw a lot with Washington, I was kind of mentioning it earlier too, with the safety duo that they have with Derek Forrest and him. He can play single high and he can play in the box, and he's really good at both. I believe he had 83 total tackles this past year, and pretty much a lot of them were kind of made in strides by him. He was really in a lot of those plays. In fact, he plugged a lot of the A's and B's. Yeah, something that you don't really see a safety do. But for Washington, he was really huge in that middle of the season stretch when they were kind of, still treading water going up and down. And I think he's definitely a cornerstone for them on defense.
Yeah, you made a good point. Like, not a lot of people are going to know Washington Commanders players, especially, with the lackluster results that they've had recently. I mean, even us, we'd be watching 4 or 5 games at a time at 1 o'clock, and the Commanders wouldn't usually be on one of those TVs. But when they were, it seems like almost every time I look over, Kamren Curl's making some type of splash play, coming up close to the line of scrimmage, stopping the run, making those clutch tackles, being that last line of defense that's helping save those touchdowns, and just being a great safety for that team that, has a great young defense in place, kind of like Jacksonville. They got guys like Montez Sweat, Chase Young, hopefully if he can stay healthy, that D-line with Deron Payne and all those guys, and now you have Kam Curl in the back end helping fortify that unit as well. They could have something special in DC if they can really put it together, especially on the defensive side of the ball, and Kam Curl emerging as a 7th-round pick is a big part of that.
Yeah, and be careful looking way too much in the stats. Kam Curl hasn't had a pick each of the last 2 years, but at the end of the day, the eye in the sky doesn't lie, and basically what that says is, the film doesn't lie. If you see a player flying around, covering people, knocking balls down, making big tackles in the backfield, he's a dominant player. Now, everything's about stats, and Kam Curl's a perfect example of that.
Exactly. Totally agree, guys.
Exactly. So those are our top 5 most underrated players in the NFL heading into 2023 with Anish helping us out. Really great to have you on the show, man. Really glad you could do this. Spitting your knowledge, as always, as expected, doing your thing, man. Really great to have you on.
Man, appreciate you guys for having me. This was really cool to do. All 5 of these players I completely agreed with, and, man, it's going to be fun to watch these guys next year.
Before we get out of here, make sure y'all check out the Cold Hard Truth podcast. Anish and friends are doing a great job expunging on their knowledge in the whole NFL landscape, so make sure to check them out as well. And, Anish, thank you for coming on. Just like 2020, the man's killed it again.
Yeah, 100%. Cold hard truth, nothing but the facts, just like here on the countdown. And before you go,
make sure you smash that like button and damn sure subscribe, because we'll be back every single week with some fire episodes.
See you next week.
Peace.